brought up my national anthem list yet. Perfect. Okay. Are you doing both today? Excellent. Okay. And then I'll bring up that list because I forgot to do it for this week. So starting to talk about rhythm. And I know we've been working on rhythm. We've been doing some rhythm repeat stuff. Hopefully that'll help this make more sense when we start working on it. Rhythm is one of those things that it's kind of like algebra, where once you get it, everything else makes sense.
Light bulb.
Oh. Until the light bulb goes off, rhythm can be very, very frustrating. My guys in the back, can we be off electronics? Thank you very much. Okay. So rhythm can be very, very frustrating because it is actually a lot of math and understanding that things take up space. And when I say space in music, we're talking about time, right? Length, duration. When we're talking about rhythm, we're talking about how we take musical time and divide it up into long or short chunks. Okay? And we have symbols that tell us how long or how short to hold on to these things for. Connor, see me after. Okay. All right. So this is where I usually get a lot of people coming in during their lessons to help. So don't. Hello.
Loading.
It's really struggling. Oh no! Sad face.
Oh, no.
Sad face.
They don't like you today.
Try this again. Something went wrong. Yeah, it's like my Disney experience all over again.
Just refresh the page.
Not right now.
Because I think we'll send out a message like changing the time we get out.
Okay.
You
In a little
get your
bit.
shoes again, Rachel.
Oh, this is not fun.
You get shoe
Where it
wear.
says something says we
I
lost,
literally changed it
where
on
it says
second
something.
I got no infections, just
I know it's just not working. The internet's been kind of spotty here lately. Okay.
So did the internet just take a poop?
Yeah, I think
Big
so.
old poop?
All right. Well, we're gonna get started without it if it ever decides to join us. So we gotta go old school today. Here we go.
Well, not full old school. Assuming
Yeah, we're not
chalk.
chalk. We're not scratching it in mud. Okay. So we have musical symbols, different note values that show us how long we're supposed to hold on to things for. So that's where we're starting, right? We've seen these. We've talked about them a little bit. Oops. Sorry, brain. Here we go. Note. Note. And then each one of those can get split into quarter notes. And that's kind of where we've gotten to so far. And each of those can be split into eighth notes. This way.
In the family tree.
Yep, and we can keep going. That could also look like this. You can beam them, and it's the same thing. Okay, so whole note looks like a circle. Half note, open circle with a stem added. Half note is half of whatever a whole note's worth. Quarter note is a half of whatever the half note is worth. We're just dividing this into 4 pieces. And then if we divide that into 8 pieces, we have the eighth note, right? So a lot of times, a lot of times, this is going to be equal to 4. Very frequently, okay? 4, 4, 3, 4, 2, 4, common time. Those are the ones we see by far the most often, right? But we can see other ones as well. This is another very common one, right? 6, 8, you just talked about 4, 4, 3, 4. 2, 2 is not uncommon, right? We see that in 3 Patriotic Treasures. So these time signatures are going to tell us a couple of different things. All right, there's lots of information that's there that affects how we count, how we figure out how long to hold on to things for. All right, we're just going to restart this and see if that helps. Okay. Sorry, Cisco. There you go. All right.
All your
So-
hard work on that slide.
Well, we'll see. It should hopefully come back. Hopefully, you don't miss anything in there. But we'll get the main ideas here. Okay. So whatever this is worth, we can figure out what the rest of these are worth in terms of counts. Okay. We figure out how much that whole note is worth based on the bottom number of the time signature. That's one thing time signatures tell us. This presentation will go on Google Classroom, so if like you need to reference this stuff later, you can see it there. So bottom number in the time signature tells us what number should go here. Okay? That's one thing that time signatures tell us. Another thing that time signatures tell us is how many of a certain kind of note we can fit in a measure. So some of you have probably heard it this way, right? The bottom or the top number tells us how many beats, and the bottom number tells us which note gets the beat. Has anybody heard that before? Right? How many beats, which note gets the beat. That works for what's called simple meter, simple time signatures, which 4/4 is. These three are simple meters, okay? They are evenly divided into two, usually, okay? So simple. So that rule works for those, right? In a simple meter, that works. So there's 4 beats in a measure, the quarter note gets the beat. 4 beats in a measure, quarter note gets the beat, right? 3 beats in a measure, quarter note gets the beat. 2 beats in a measure, the half note gets the beat. Half note gets the pulse. So that works in simple meter. It doesn't work so well in compound meters. Depends, okay? So we'll talk a little bit more about compound meters later. The one like description of a time signature that's going to work no matter what, and this is how I usually teach it. So if you've heard it that other way, it's not necessarily wrong. It just only applies to simple meter. This one works for every meter, every time signature ever. Okay, so if I say meter time signature, I'm talking about the same thing. Okay, so what I say is the top number is how many, and the bottom number is what kind. Sorry, but you gotta get out of the way. Okay. All right. So what that means, the top number tells me how many of what kind of note can fit in a measure. So if I'm writing in music, remember a measure is everything between 2 bar lines, right? So here's my time signature at the beginning. Here's my measure. I can fit 4 quarter notes. I'll just make that into a fraction to figure out what kind. I can fit 4 quarter notes in that measure. If this was 6/8, I can fit 6 eighth notes, 6 eighth notes in that measure. I just have to make that a fraction, right? 1/8, 1/4, 1/2. I can fit 2 half notes in a measure. That doesn't mean I can only ever use half notes or I can only ever use quarter notes. This is where people tend to get a little bit confused. So hang on. Here we go. So this is where this comes in handy, right? So let's start with 4/4. We're gonna start with a really simple, basic time signature that we see all the time. All the time. So I know I can fit 4 quarter notes in that measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that the only thing I can fit in that measure? No, I have lots of options, right? So what's another equivalent of 4 quarter notes? What else could I put, Eve?
2 half.
I could put 2 half notes, right? It's the same thing as 4 quarter notes. So I could put 2 half notes there instead. Right? I could put 1 whole note. I could put 8 eighth notes. Or any combination. What do you want to put in there, Kayla?
I'm gonna put 4 sets of triplets.
We can divide things into 3 that all equal 1 beat. I'm not going to do that right now, but we could. We could do something like this. Right? We haven't talked much about rests yet, but each one of these represents sound, right? The duration of sound. They have an equivalent of silence, right? This would be 1 quarter rest, just like it's 1 quarter note. So that would be the same amount of silence as that is of sound. 1/8 rest would be the same value as this note, this eighth note. It's just there's no sound instead. What's up?
Isn't the 2 count one? Isn't it the top hat?
Top hat,
There
yes.
we go.
Hat,
Okay.
half,
I always mix them up.
and then
Bottom hat.
hole in the ground for a
Bunny
whole
jigsaw
rest.
puzzle.
Okay, so those things are interchangeable. For these, it's just silence instead of sound. silence instead of sound. You guys okay? All right. So one of the things you're gonna have to do this week is make some measures in different meters. You have to remember how many is the top number, what kind is the bottom number, okay? The other thing that it's gonna ask you to do, let me write an example up here. Actually, let's do it this way. Okay, so if I have this example, okay, one measure in 4/4 time, I can put 4 quarter notes, 4 beats per measure. We've been doing counting language. So if I did this 1, 2, look and say, what would that tell us? Let's go 1, 2, look and say 1,
3.
That's counting language. So the first step is to, over the top of it, it's going to ask you to write the number of beats each one of those things is worth. So in 4/4 time, we know that the whole note is worth 4. Figured that out by the bottom number, right? Plug that in there. So how many beats is a quarter note worth in 4/4? 1. So I'm just going to write a 1 over that. How many beats would a quarter rest be? 1. Also 1, just of rest, right? And then how many beats would the half note be?
2.
Okay, so that's step 1. It's going to ask you to do that. Don't get that confused with counting language, because then it's going to ask you to put the counting language underneath. So what that looks like is this. We said 1 out loud. 2, we didn't say anything. So when we know it's still there, we know it exists, but we don't want to say it out loud. So when we don't say it out loud, if it's a rest, we put that in parentheses, right? I don't say that out loud. And then we said 3,
But we don't say 4.
but we don't say 4. It's connected, right? It's connected to that one, so we don't say it out loud. Those don't go away, right? There's 4 pulses in that measure. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those don't go away just because we don't say them. 1, 3. They still exist, right? The paths still were there. It still keeps going. So we might not say them, but we want to label where they happen in the measure. So this helps us to know how many of these should fit underneath, right? If this is worth 1 count in 4/4 time, there should be 1 beat underneath there. 1 count in 4/4 time, 1 beat underneath there. 2 counts in 4/4 time, 2 beats underneath there, okay? And if I just glance at this really quickly, I gotta remember, yeah, it's all whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and their rest equivalents, okay? There's no 8th notes on there yet. There's no syncopation on there yet, so you don't have to worry about some of the funky stuff that happens there. This is the kind of stuff you're gonna be asked to do in your work for the week. Questions, comments, concerns so far? Time signatures, rhythm, especially when it comes to performing rhythm, is complicated. If it's easy for you, awesome. But if you're struggling, please know that that is very common. Rhythm is not easy. Your brain has to sort of wrap around this idea of music being math, of things taking up space, and recognizing how much space. Okay. Yeah, and sometimes it takes a while, right? And then once the light bulb goes off, it's like, oh, I got it now, right? And it starts to click. So hopefully, as we do rhythm repeat in class, that helps it to click because we're practicing what we're doing. Hopefully, writing it out helps it to click because you see it physically as well as hearing it in class. But that's what you're going to be doing, okay? So you have an intro level and an advanced level. They're very similar. Advanced, you're just going to be doing some rhythm composing at the bottom. This one, you're just mostly doing the labeling we just talked about right here. And then figuring out based on the time signature what the whole notes were. Okay? It's a pretty short one today, one-sided. That's it. All right, so basic. I'm going to leave right here, and then I'll take the advanced one. There you go, there you go. There you go, you're welcome. And the race. Please stay in until the bell rings, you got a little work time.
Kyle, can I check now?
Yes.
Looking so down in the
Okay, so you know why I was asking you.
Even